Coming up on Philosophy Talk.
Philosophy and literature.
And now it's time for novel writing, which today comes from the West Country, from Dorset.
And the crowd goes quiet now as Hardy settles himself down at the desk, body straight, shoulders relaxed, pen held lightly but firmly in the right hand. He dips the pen in the ink and he's off!
Can we learn truth by reading fiction?
It's the first word, but it's not a word. Oh no, it's a doodle way up on the top of the left-hand margin. It's a piece of meaningless scribble.
Literature as philosophy.
But he's off again, and here he goes. The first word of Thomas Hardy's new novel at 10:35 on this very lovely morning. It's 3 letters, it's the definite article, and it's the.
Our guest is Lanier Anderson from Stanford University.
And he's writing fluently, easily, with flowing strokes of the pen as he comes up to the middle of this first sentence. And with this 11th novel well underway, and the prospects of a good day's writing ahead.
Philosophy and literature.
Coming up on Philosophy Talk.
Back to the studio.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. We're coming to you from the studios of KSCL in Shreveport, Louisiana, on the campus of Centenary College.
Continuing conversations that began at Philosopher's Corner on the Stanford campus.
Today, philosophy and literature.
Ken, shouldn't that be philosophy versus literature? Philosophy aims at the truth. It's written in precise, if plodding prose. It appeals to the intellect rather than the emotions. Literature, on the other hand, contains fiction rather than truth, metaphorical rather than literal language. Literature takes us on soaring leaps of the imagination. Philosophy, step-by-step logical argument. Literature grabs you in the gut. Philosophy grabs you in the gray matter.
Gee, John, I guess there really are differences between philosophy and literature, and I think they're important differences, but I also think you're underestimating both. Some works of literature are highly philosophical, and some works of philosophy are highly literary.
We're going to explore the relationship between philosophy and literature in 3 steps. In our first segment, we'll look at philosophy through literature. That is, we'll take literature as a vehicle for doing philosophy by taking a look at how certain great works of literature actually deal with enduring philosophical themes.
And in our second segment, we'll consider the philosophy of literature. We'll ask questions like, can we learn anything at all about the real world through reading works of fiction? What's distinctive about literary language? And how do works of fiction manage to move our emotions so powerfully, even when they're mostly made-up stories?
And in our last segment, we'll consider philosophy as literature. Philosophers write in all sorts of literary genres. They write dialogues, meditations, pensées, fragments, and aphorisms. What difference does a literary form make to a philosophical work?
That last thing you were talking about, take Plato's Symposium. It's one of Plato's greatest dialogues, and it's a superb piece of philosophy about the nature of love and beauty, mortality and immortality. But it would be really hard to distinguish that, John, from a work of fiction. It's full of metaphor, it's full of made-up events and character and conversations, and it contains these moments of high drama. It's a great piece of philosophy that's also a great piece of literature.
Or, from the other side, take Shakespeare's Hamlet. It's a great play, full of emotion and drama, but it's also an extended philosophical meditation concerning the meaning of life, the role of chance and fortune in shaping our lives, the nature of the self, the presence or absence of divine providence in human affairs, revenge, repentance. It's a great piece of literature that's also a fine piece of philosophy.
So, John, it seems like you're saying that there aren't such big differences between literature and philosophy after all.
Well, let's not get carried away, Ken. After all, I don't think I've ever read a philosophy book or an article that made me cry, moved me to tears. It happens all the time with poems and novels.
I didn't know you were such a sop, John. But no doubt, there's no doubt about it. You can learn a lot about philosophy by reading works of literature, and you can learn a lot about literature by thinking philosophically about it.
Our roving philosophical reporter, Zoe Corneli, went out and talked to some people who were equally devoted to literature and philosophy. She files this report.
If they had been perfect friends, he should have maintained that as a hypothetical example, it is absurd. Rather
so
than,
he should have just said the same thing.
In the yellow lamplight of Nancy Wortman's living room, 10 people have gathered over glasses of wine to talk about Michel de Montaigne's essays on friendship and solitude.
Well, it's just that they did not have this perfect coincidence of mind.
This Great Books reading group has been meeting in San Francisco for 40 years. Duke Edwards has been here since the beginning.
We pretend that we have the author in front of us. He's there. And we ask him questions about what he wrote and what he was talking about. And he answers through the words in the pages.
The official list of great books from the Great Books Foundation in Chicago spans continents and millennia. The works have a few things in common. They relate to today's world and to the great questions of the ages, and they can be read again and again without losing interest. But that doesn't mean they're easy reads.
In a sense, this forces you in communion to do the reading.
Vince Gardina is another longtime member of this group. He lounges in an easy chair in the far corner, wearing track pants and a plaid flannel shirt.
How many of us on our own would pick up Aeschylus, Pascal, Tocqueville, Ibsen, Freud, Verlaine, and to read for just pleasure and entertainment?
Chris Ostergren says the great in great books means important, not holy.
While they're called great books, we're not obliged to venerate them. We rough them up a little.
For it is rare for anyone to respect himself enough.
I think Montaigne does.
This group doesn't try to draw a line between philosophy and literature. Instead, the two meld and interact with each other.
On page 121, he quotes Socrates. Socrates says that the young should get instruction, that grown men should practice doing good.
At times, the conversation itself is reminiscent of a Socratic dialogue. Ostergren says he thinks the group is doing philosophy. I asked him what that means.
It means to get to try to get at the bottom of certain basic questions. I'm not going to give a very idealistic answer like we're seeking truth. You know, then there's the whole discussion, is there such a thing as truth, you know?
Grace Ebel takes a simpler view.
The main purpose of meeting to discuss these is to give our opinions on what we think this author's saying, whether it's philosophy or literature or drama or poetry, no matter what it is. And I think part of the reason we enjoy it, well, at least I know that I enjoy it, is it's entertainment.
We don't get to choose.
It's clear there's a lot of deep thinking going on in this room, although not everyone thinks the same thing. Members Vince Gardina, Janet Redner, and Bernice Hunnold even disagree about the significance of the group.
You know, in the normal daily life, you don't meet these kind of people. You meet the people who are into sports and the TV programs and the latest movie.
I disagree with you that discussions like this are unusual, because I know many people you sit down with them and discuss politics, something that's happening in the world, the meaning of what is happening. I think these kinds of discussions are very common.
But I'll tell you, one of the big things that I get from the group is that we differ so much. We've read the same thing, and our reactions are so different because our backgrounds are different. And I love the differences.
What?
There's a self.
There's
yes.
a self.
But that's not necessarily your soul.
Well, who knows?
The overriding lesson from this group is it really doesn't matter whether a book is classified as philosophy or literature. All great books can teach us about life or relationships or religion. The important thing is to read them and talk about them. For Philosophy Talk, I'm Zoe Corneli.
I'm John Perry. With me is Ken Taylor.
And our guest today, coming to us from the studios back in San Francisco in KLW, is Lanier Anderson. He's professor of philosophy at Stanford University. He's the co-founder of Stanford's Philosophical and Literary Thought program. Lanier, welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Hi, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Lanier, tell me, why did you feel there was a need for a combined philosophy and literature program at Stanford?
Well, really since college, I've been fascinated by the connection between philosophy and literature. It seemed like a place where you could really explore some cool questions about what kind of place the world is and how to live in it, and at the same time work on especially beautiful writing about those questions. But there has been kind of a history of mistrust between philosophers and literary critics, and at Stanford, we've seemed to have found a way to overcome that mistrust based on a sort of little c Catholic conception of the subject. We found that if you're if you let yourself really be open to what you can learn from the expert knowledge being produced in another discipline, it turns out you can enrich your own work and have fun like those people in the reading group at the same time.
Okay, Lanier, I admit literature can have profound thoughts and nice expressions of those, but do you really think it's possible to do philosophy, make progress philosophically through literature?
I guess I really do, John. I think that often we learn something really important about the question that we're investigating because we confront a piece of writing that takes a somewhat indirect route to that question and forces us to think about it in a new way.
What's the best example, Lanier?
What's the best example?
Yeah.
Well, Plato's dialogues started the whole thing, both from a philosophical and a literary point of view. But there are lots and lots of ways that philosophy can be done through literature. And that ranges all the way from sort of a straightforward thought experiment about what would it be like if such and such happened. For example, when Borges says, what would it be like if somebody in the 19th century actually wrote word for word a chapter of the novel Don Quixote, and then he writes a little story, Pierre Menard, the author of the Quixote, and explores what that would be like.
So let me ask you. So you can perform thought experiments through literature, and that's one thing that philosophy consists in, is helping you to imagine other ways the world might be. And you're saying that literature is a vivid way of somehow enabling you to do that, and many works of literature are about that. But so is there a kind of distinctive? It seems to me you're suggesting that there are distinctive philosophical virtues and goals that you could achieve in kind of literary form. Am I understanding you right?
I guess I think there are distinctively literary methods for pursuing goals in philosophy, and sometimes we get more progress from the literary method than we would by trying directly to think about the question in the first place.
Give me an example of that, of where thinking about it through the literary method gives us more, hold on progress.
Well, maybe a good way to think about this is, there are lots of literary works where the aim of the literary work is to investigate some concept. Like Camus wrote a novel called The Plague, the real point of which is to investigate the concept of freedom. And what he's able to do, because he puts a wide range of characters in front of us, is to show at the same time how different kinds of people react to the deprivation of freedom and to the need for it. So he imagines a circumstance in which a town, the plague descends on a town and everybody's confined in the town, and the whole story is about how different people react to the loss of their freedom.
Right, and so you could sort of trot out possibilities and make them vivid to the imagination through this exercise in literature in a way that maybe you can't do in philosophy, or maybe that just says one style of writing literature isn't that distinct from philosophizing.
One thing that those literary texts can do that philosophers tend to avoid, as John was saying earlier, is that they can strike our emotions and elicit our emotional reactions to the philosophical question. And sometimes those emotional reactions can produce new kinds of insights for us that we wouldn't immediately come to if we just thought about it in abstraction from our emotions.
Now you're sounding a little bit like, I don't know, if Dick Rorty might have. He seemed to think that literature was a superior means of philosophizing in many ways to standard old analytic philosophy. I mean, are you endorsing that kind of view?
I guess I don't endorse that view. I guess I think of them, and this is what I was trying to get at by saying that we should have a little C Catholic approach. I think that there are different ways of approaching them, and different approaches are useful for different purposes. So sometimes engaging our emotions can be like what philosophers of mind call simulating. We use our emotions to gain access to commitments or value judgments that we don't really think about or admit to ourselves at the full conscious level, but we can tell from our emotional response to a situation that we really hold them. And so the literature can, in that case, bring something to the surface that we might not have been thinking about before.
Lanier, I'm going to explore these thoughts with you a little bit more fully after a short break. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. Today we're discussing philosophy and literature with Lanier Anderson.
We've been talking about doing philosophy through literature, about literature as a vehicle for philosophical thought. But in our next segment, we're going to shift gears and look at the philosophy of literature. What can we learn about the real world by reading works of fiction? What's distinctive about the language of fiction? Why does fiction so often have such a powerful effect on our emotions, even though we know it's just pretend? We're coming to you live from Louisiana, but you can call toll-free from anywhere in the U.S., 1-800-525-9917, 1-800-525-9917.
The philosophy of literature, plus your calls and emails when Philosophy Talk continues.
Shakespeare, and they'll all kowtow. Thinkst thou, and they'll all kowtow. Odds bodkins, they'll all kowtow.
The Bard was a great poet and philosopher. How does literature work on our emotions? Why is brushing up your Shakespeare such a good idea? What can we learn about the real world by reading pure fiction? I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. We're live from Louisiana today, courtesy of Shreveport member station KSCL. This is Philosophy Talk, and we want your thoughts on philosophy and literature. So give us a call, toll free, 1-800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917. Or for you who are online, you can email us at comments@philosophytalk.org.
Our guest is Stanford's young dynamic philosophy professor, Lanier Anderson.
So, Lanier, toward the end there, you maybe hinted at an answer to the question I'm about to ask you. Literature is a lot of pure fiction, a lot of just made-up stuff, and sometimes, and to a certain extent, anything goes in literature. You can change the laws of physics, you can change history, you can just make it all up. So, how possibly could we learn anything about the real world, about reality, from pure fiction when it's not about reality at all?
Well, here are two ways that we could think about it. So there are two kinds of philosophical questions that we can ask about the fiction itself. Answering them can turn out to teach us something about questions that we were already concerned about the real world. So one domain is questions about how language itself works. How do literary works convey things without actually saying them outright in devices like irony and metaphor? And there's a whole branch of philosophy of language called pragmatics, about which you and John know more than I do. And we can learn a lot about pragmatics from looking at the way literary texts work.
Lanier, don't feel bad. John and I know more about pragmatics than God himself does. So, okay, we can learn about pragmatics by looking at literary text in action, as it were. But okay, so.
But then there are broader questions about what it is to be a human person and to exist in the world that we can think about by asking ourselves questions like, how does a fiction work to affect us? Why do we care about characters like Anna Karenina that we know in advance aren't real? When we figure out why we would do that, then that can teach us things about how our minds really work in the world and what role the imagination and pretense and things like that have in our everyday lives.
Oh, okay, Lanier, I'll buy it. Why do we care about fictional characters like Anna Karenina?
Interesting question, John. I wish I knew the answer. Why do we care? Well, part of what great literature does for us is to pull us into an imaginative world. And there's a real question about whether we do care about characters like Anna Karenina or whether we actually just pretend to care. If we just pretend to care, then maybe what we're doing is trying out our emotional life or trying out our emotions in imagined scenarios so that we'll be better at emotionally reacting to the world when we confront things in real life.
So it's like exercise. It's like practice for our capacity to judge and feel. We trot out these fictional characters. We see what it's like to care and judge, and that's like playing a practice baseball game. When you get to where the stakes are real, your kind of emotional muscles are honed and attuned. Is that the kind of idea?
Yeah, something like that. And if what's really important in these literary works is something like how do you best and most morally interact with another person or something like that, then training your emotions about how to perceive the morally relevant features of a situation and how to react to them in a sensitive way could be something that is easily transferable from your imaginative life into your real life, precisely because what's important is to be able to do something like imagine how the other person is feeling.
Okay, so let's take a great work of literature like the movie Pretty Woman with Richard Gere and Julia Roberts. And at the end of that, I'm sobbing away because Julia thinks she's, just got no future with Richard. I'm not pretending to sob. I'm not pretending to cry. I mean, it's perfectly real. And yet I don't believe it. Is this pretense theory really going to wash?
I don't know.
Are they pretend emotions or real emotions? And if they're pretend emotions, that's weird.
So it depends on what you think an emotion is. So here's where you start to learn something about the nature of the world from answering this question. Do you think that an emotion is something that has, as a necessary constituent, a real judgment about the world? If you do, then your emotion about the Julia Roberts character can't be a real emotion. After all, you don't jump up and try to help her.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
That's true. Let's leave it to...
If you really cared about her, John, wouldn't you jump up and try to help her?
Yeah, particularly in that bathtub scene. I might have helped her out of the bathtub.
Well, if you really cared about her and you believe she was real, you might jump up and try to help her. But let's see what some listeners think. This is Philosophy Talk. We're discussing philosophy and literature. Right now we're in the philosophy of literature with Lanier Anderson. We'd like you to know what your thoughts are. You can join us by calling 1-800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917. And Philip in Brisbane, California is on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Philip.
Oh, thank you. I took an intro to philosophy course many years ago as an undergraduate, and I was interested to learn that they said that Voltaire wasn't much read anymore outside of the popular press promoting his book Candide, which people read like crazy. So that led me to look into reading a little bit more of Voltaire, just out of curiosity, and I found that he was writing very lively, really enchanting stories, I thought, and that they had great philosophical merits, like, showing the value of living in moderation, and things like using reason versus magical thinking or religious dogma to sort out the events of your life. And I think a prime example of that might be the story The Basilisk, if you're familiar with it. I also thought it was interesting, and I'm not a Voltaire authority by any means, but I felt, and I wonder if you might know something about this, that he was setting his stories in exotic locales, mostly because if you actually criticize the king or the church of his times, you could get whacked.
So, Philip, thanks for the question. I take it part of Philip's point is to illustrate that you really can do philosophy through literary devices and genres, and one key to what he said, something that really intrigued me in what he said, Lanier, is I wonder if you thought he said you can show something about the well-lived life. I don't remember show exactly what, but showing something is different from arguing for something or giving you a deductive proof that you ought to live this way. But somehow through literature you can show what you try to say or argue in philosophy. What do you think about that thought?
I think there is something interesting about that, and so in response to Philip, I have to say that I'm the unfortunate product of the very educational trend that he was talking about, and the only Voltaire I ever read was Candide. But
yeah, me too.
I do think that there's that he's onto something with this notion of showing. A lot of times, fiction writers try to do something like get us to exercise the moral imagination, get us to feel the importance of some point. Dickens is a great example of this. Or novels like Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, where you learn something about what it would be like to be another person through imagining the interior life of the character guided by the fiction. And that's supposed to show you something about what it's like to feel like that person in a way that lets you learn something that you might not have been able to learn if somebody just told you in a series of declarative sentences, well, African Americans experience this and that in our culture.
Right. So I'm like Philip. I admire Voltaire. I think a good way to read Voltaire is to get a copy of his encyclopedia. It's a big book, and you just can open it up anywhere and read a couple of paragraphs that he has to say about religion or Catholicism or whatever. And he was a very witty man, very bright man. I sometimes think the wittier you are, the less likely you are to be read several centuries later. But
well, John, you're in trouble then, since you're a great wit. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're talking about philosophy and literature with our guest Lanier Anderson, and we'd like you to join our conversation. 1-800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917, or email us at comments@philosophytalk.org. And we have Richard in Oakland, California on the line now. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Richard.
Yes, how are you? That's a very fascinating conversation. The thing that I wanted to address was the question that one of your commentators raised about why people care about these characters, even though it's, quote, pure fiction. And I almost think the commentator is baiting us with the term pure, because I really don't, I mean, I'm raising the issue of whether any fiction is really pure, because even the authors of these pieces interject some of their personal reality into their characters, and I think that may be one of the reasons why the reader cares, is because we identify with these characters and bring some of our reality into their fiction, even in a fantasy like, say, Star Trek. It's a character development, and the characters often demonstrate real characteristics.
Right, Richard, I think thanks for the call. You're making an excellent point, and we did intend to bait you with the thing pure fiction. And I think Lanier picked up one part of it. Part of fiction can be just pure fiction. I can make up whatever laws of physics I want, but I can't really in fiction make up the laws of human psychology or the laws of or the principles of morality. I say, pretend that people love to be beaten to death. Pretend that it's all right to murder children. You won't go along with that. I think, Lanier, that shows that there's some constraints. It's not really just anything goes. What do you think?
Well, maybe there are no constraints, but in some cases, we abandon even our most deeply held moral convictions in an effort to learn by imagining what it would be like to be another kind of person with different commitments. So here's an example for you. Well, let's go back to the movies. Did you guys see that movie, The Usual Suspects?
Yeah,
So there's a case where there's an extremely evil character in that movie named Kaiser Soze, who's a master criminal who can do anything and is completely ruthless and will kill anybody. But we really sympathize with him at the end of that movie, we want him to get away.
Well, I'm not sure about we want him to get away, but I do think that's true. That movie is partly an exploration of the psychology of evil, but it has to be the real psychology of evil. If you make up the psychology of evil, it's not very good fiction, I don't think. Put this evil character here, because one of the things Peter Van Ingen once said on the show, that we don't understand evil, that we can't think ourselves into the mind of the evil, that the evil is utterly other. I don't think that's true. Right? I don't think that's true. And good fiction can take us into the psychology of evil. John, you're looking a little puzzled here.
Well, no, both of you guys seem to be agreeing that there's a kernel of truth at the bottom of good fiction. You might say this way: the world is not just made up of events and episodes and things, but also constraints that make it all sorts of if-then statements true, right? You can get at the truth about the constraints that operate in the world. Even though the examples you give of how they work are fictional. And you wonder if a piece of fiction doesn't intersect with the truth at some level, if not at the level of real characters, at least at the level of real constraints and real counterfactual facts about the way things operate, would it be of any interest?
I think that's a good point. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're talking about philosophy and literature with Lanier Anderson. We'd like you to join us. 1-800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917. Or email us at comments@philosophytalk.org. And Margaret in Oakland's on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Margaret.
Thank you. I wanted to know what you gentlemen think about narrative. And is that really that essence of literature? And what's the philosophy of mind of that? Like, why do we tell coherent stories that have a point?
Darn good question, Lanier. You got a view about narrative and where it comes from and why we do it?
Well, there are some philosophers who think that thinking of our own lives with a narrative structure, having a beginning, a middle, and an end, is essential to how we think of ourselves as people. And there are some philosophers who try to deny that. One amazing piece of philosophical fiction is a sustained effort to explore what it would be like if that weren't true. So I have in mind Sartre's novel Le Nozze. He invents a character, Antoine Roquentin, who is in the middle of losing his grip on the project that has made his life meaningful up to now. And the whole idea is to imagine what it would be like if you lost that narrative continuity and all of a sudden changed into a completely different person. And the book is full of these detailed descriptions of how incredibly disorienting and nauseating that kind of experience would be.
Right, but okay. So we could try and give up this narrativity, this narrative impulse, but and it would be weird and disorienting. But you got to admit that sort of the default is that people like to narrate things. I mean, you might call humans the Homo narratatis or something. I don't know what the Latinate thing would be, but we're narrating creatures. Don't you think that's true?
I guess I agree with that, but I myself believe that it's not that that's a necessary feature of our minds as such that we couldn't be so minded without, but rather it's a norm that we try to live up to. We try to make our lives narratively coherent, and we approximate that as best we can, but it's not as though we're bound to succeed.
Oh, well, I don't think we're bound to succeed in making our lives narratively coherent, but I think it's an internal biological drive of the human brain to try to narrate things, to impose narratives even when they aren't there. But John wanted to make a point.
Well, I just wondered, what's the we and we try to make our lives narratively coherent? We philosophers, we intellectuals, we high-level academics. Does your average person really care that much about narrative coherence? If they said, look, you're living your life in such a way that it's going to make a boring story, why don't you go out and have an adventure? Would they be moved?
Well, they might not want to be in an adventure story, but I think when people, I think ordinary people do want to make their lives coherent in a narrative sense, and that comes out in cases like this. When we say to somebody else in ordinary life, look, that thing really happened to you in your past. It matters that you were the person who went through that experience. What are you going to do with your life now to make sense of that experience? That is a narrative impulse on our part.
On that note, I'll say you're listening to Philosophy Talk. We'll take this up some more after the break, Lanier. We're discussing philosophy and literature with Lanier Anderson from Stanford University.
We've been talking about the philosophy of literature, about literature as an object of philosophical study. In our next segment, we'll consider philosophy itself as literature. We'll ask how the literary form of philosophical work may affect how we interpret it.
Philosophical dialogues, meditations, and aphorism when Philosophy Talk continues.
We're talking about literature and philosophy. I'm John Perry. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor. Our guest is Lanier Anderson, co-founder of Stanford's Literary and Philosophical Thought Program. And today, we're coming to you from member station KSCL in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Lanier, historically, philosophical writing has taken all forms. Dialogues, pensées, meditations like Descartes wrote. Nietzsche wrote in aphorisms. Philosophers don't do that sort of thing so much anymore. They tend to write articles or book chapters that kind of have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that's about it. I think that's a real loss. What do you think?
I guess I do think it's a loss, too. And these different forms that philosophy has been written in historically really help us sometimes to get at the philosophical point. So take dialogue as the classic example that goes all the way back to the beginning. If you're reading a real dialogue with characters who have, where none of the characters is just the mouthpiece of the author who's telling you what you're supposed to think, then you have a genuine contest of views right there on the page, and it kind of forces you to think along with them by getting you to try to understand what these views are from the inside, how they work, how they might interact, and how you might locate yourself in there.
Right, and take a Descartes meditation. I mean, I think he really intended the reader to go through the meditative process that he was going through, first contemplating the reliability of the senses and then contemplating the reliability, the dreaming argument and all that, and just to go through this sea of doubt and take on this exercise. But philosophers don't much ask their audience, their readers, to do that anymore. Why do you think, why is that? Why did we give up writing in all those forms?
I don't know why exactly we did, but maybe talking a little bit about the aphorism might suggest one thought. An aphorism, what is an aphorism? It's some pithy little saying that captures an idea in a really tight sentence. A slur about that, an unflattering way of describing what it is that it's a philosophical thesis that sounds better than it has a right to. And right. Philosophers, don't want to sound better than they have a right to. They want really to be able to deliver with reasons, and so maybe that's part of the reason that. But it's not. But
in the work of literature, you ask the reader to go with you on a journey in the imagination, and the reader has to execute some of the moves in the imagination on his or her own. You invite them to make the moves. I mean, but that's like saying, if we're not going to write in aphorisms, we're not confident that the reader can make the movement in thought, right, on their own. We can't just issue an invitation to a movement in thought. We got to lead them through it step by step.
Well, now, as one of the few philosophers who still writes dialogues, I'll point out that the professionalization of philosophy has something to do with this. If you write in a dialogue or an aphorism or in these non-traditional ways, your tenure committees don't know what to make of it. I like dialogues because I can present different views without having to make up my mind which is right. But people, when they're looking at promotion, they want to know, well, what's this guy's view? What's his reasons for it? How have people reacted to it? So it doesn't fit into the profession very well.
We've got a caller on the line who had some encounter with Rorty, who's a great fan of literature and thinking philosophy should be more like literature. That's Judd in San Francisco. Judd, what's your comment? I need you to keep it brief.
Listen, I want to congratulate you guys. You're really on the right theme. Richard Rorty passed away recently, but I'm sure you've read his latest book, which is Take Care of Freedom, and the Truth Will Take Care of Itself. My position is take care of truth, and freedom will take care of itself. So I was getting into a dialogue with Richard Rorty, and I really loved the show you did a few weeks ago where you blended philosophy with imagination. So that's what I'm saying. You've got the theme here, and what's really important is relevance. I think I want to make contact with you all so I can send you what I've been working on that blends relevance and with philosophy
Judd,
and with literature.
We'll make that contact offline, but thanks for your comment. Lanier, do you have any... Rorty is a great influence in these debates about philosophy and literature. He thought that philosophy should try to be more like literature, right, and give up the old things we were doing. Are you moved by those Rortyan thoughts at all?
Well, I am moved by some of them, and I think that our former colleague, Professor Rorty, made amazing contributions to our field precisely by emphasizing that we should be more broad-minded about the strategies that we pursue, the strategies we took in trying to pursue our philosophical aims. And sometimes literary strategies, as John was pointing out, might be more effective at engaging our audience in philosophizing on its own terms.
We've got an interesting email here from Lacey, and she's here at Centenary College. Do philosophical works lose value or philosophical credibility if they are open to wider and more diverse interpretations? I mean, that is interesting because some of the great philosophers like Nietzsche seem to be open to lots of interpretations, and yet amongst contemporaries, we really want a person to be clear about what it is they're saying. Is there an inconsistency in our approach to philosophy there?
Well, I think it's here are two broad kinds of philosophy. There are philosophical projects, the aim of which is to produce the best kind of theory we can about some question, and their explicitness and precision are important philosophical values. Another kind of philosophical project, though, is to raise and put before the philosophical community in in compelling way a new philosophical problem. And in that case, for that kind of project, it can be important to indicate all the various ways that that problem might be taken and might be developed.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to this thing where in literature we're willing to invite the reader to execute a movement in the imagination where we're not necessarily their ultimate guide, but we get them started, right, on a problem. You judge Madame Bovary, judge these people, judge those people. In philosophy, we're kind of reluctant to just do the invitation without being the final guide. And sometimes when a text is open to many interpretations, you can just say, what the writer did was to invite you in. He didn't tell you he's going to be your guide for the entire evening.
But maybe philosophers tend to be most comfortable when they kind of keep control. Maybe they're kind of intellectual control freaks.
Control freaks.
We want to make sure you said, first I want you to think this thought, and then this thought, and then this thought. And to get yourself in this more literary mode is to let go a little of the reader's mind.
You have one last comment about that, Lanier?
Well, I think that in cases like Descartes' Meditations, for example, the philosopher does want us to take our own experiences as a kind of evidence for the view that he's pushing, and he is trying to guide us, but he's trying to guide us to have those experiences in the same way the Loyolan spiritual exercises that he was drawing on were trying to guide people to have certain religious experiences. But the aim is, but the crucial thing is that if we don't have the experience ourselves, we won't be able to see the philosophical point he was trying to get us to reach.
On that note, Lanier, I'm going to have to thank you for joining us.
It was really fun, John and Ken, and thanks again for inviting me.
Our guest has been Lanier Anderson, professor of philosophy at Stanford University and co-founder of the Philosophical and Literary Thought Program. So, John, what did you learn today?
Well, in thinking about philosophy and literature, I'm drawn to make the following distinction. I mean, I really have tried various kinds of genre of philosophy. I think to do philosophy, trying to write a dialogue is not very helpful. But to convey philosophy, a novel or a dialogue might be very good. On the other hand, aphorisms, the kind of Wittgenstein, Nietzsche style, that's a very good way to do philosophy, to get yourself into philosophy, but I don't think it's a very good thing to publish. I think you ought to try to figure out what it was you're getting at.
Well, that's true. I mean, especially if you want to be a professional philosopher and get tenure at a place like Stanford, you never get tenure for writing aphorisms. But I think the story of philosophy reaching out to a broader audience and engaging more people, I think it's a real loss that we've lost the philosophy as literature gene. I mean, I think that would be a great thing I'm urging all you philosophers out there, think of philosophy as literature and write it for the world, in all kinds of forms, just like the old greats did.
Well, there are some philosophers who do that. Of course, we had Al Gini on the show recently, and he's written some novels and plays as well as philosophical books. Iris Murdoch kind of went from philosophy into writing novels, so
there's hope. There's hope. There's hope. But and back to narrativity, I think narrativity is a fundamental human thing, and that's why literature is so grand, because it narrates life, it narrates the meaning of life, and we're narrative consuming and producing creatures, so it's a good thing. But this conversation continues, as always, on our blog, the blog.philosophytalk.org, where our motto is cogito ergo blogo. I think, therefore I blog.
You can download podcasts of our program from our website as well.
Ken, all during the show, I've had this drumming in my head.
John, that's not drumming in your head. That's conundrumming in your head. And we've got a caller on the line now with a conundrum in his head. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Jeff.
Hi, how's it going?
So, where are you calling from, Jeff?
San Francisco.
And what do you do here in San Francisco?
Oh, I work in investment management.
So why don't you tell us about your conundrum, Jeff?
So basically, it involves the Caltrain, and it involves people who have frequently approached me in a rude manner to tell me to not use my cell phone on the Caltrain.
You're one of those people who talks on your cell phone on Caltrain, huh?
For those outside of San Francisco and outside the Bay Area, Caltrain is a commuter train. So you're talking on the train as you commute back and forth to work, right? And apparently you're talking loud enough for people to hear what you're talking about. You're conducting business and personal affairs. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they can make it out if they pay attention, but I mean, I feel that it's no different than if I was having a conversation with the person next to me. I feel that, this is in some ways a symmetric situation. They want a quiet ride, and I want to be able to use my, hour-long commute to communicate with people that I need to for business or for, just to talk to people I haven't talked to in a while, because it's a really convenient time for me to make calls. I'm pretty busy.
So let me ask you a question. What's your conundrum? Do you feel somehow that you ought to respect these requests, but you feel it's important to do your business, and so you feel torn? I mean, or it sounds to me like you just think those people are wrong. I mean, what's the conundrum for you?
The conundrum is basically, do they really have a right to stifle my freedom to talk because they want their freedom to sleep or to just enjoy the train in a quiet manner? So sort of who has the superseding rights?
But now let's just get the facts straight. So you're not one of these people who, when they speak on the phone, jacks the volume up because you're speaking to someone not within earshot. They're not going to hear you unless you really talk loud. You're not one of those people.
No, I don't think I'm talking in an excessively loud voice.
Now, are you a person whose normal voice is relatively loud? I mean, if you were talking to someone next to you and I was sitting behind you, could I actually understand what you're saying?
I think you probably... Well, if you ask my girlfriend, she would frequently mention that I have quite a loud voice.
Well, it seems to me that your conundrum actually reflects a kind of ambiguity in our conventions about certain kinds of public space. I mean, it's clear that if you go into a church and people are sitting on the pews, not during church service, but just being meditative, you really shouldn't use a cell phone. Everybody would acknowledge that. I'm sure you should. On the other hand, if you're in a large business area where there may be many desks and people conducting business, some on computers, some on phones, obviously you should keep your voice down so as not to make it impossible for other people to conduct their business. But the idea that you shouldn't be making noise is absurd. Now, what are train cars? I mean, where do they fit in? Well, just like you said, some people have one conception. This is a time to relax before the start of your day or after the end of your day. And historically, maybe that has a certain validity simply because for a long time you couldn't use phones because they weren't there, right? So there's certain practices and expectations that build up. So these people probably feel that history has pushed them into a situation they don't belong in.
I was thinking almost the same thing, So here's this public space that's being reconfigured by the advent of a certain kind of technology. Now, here's the thing, Jeff. You just assert the right to reconfigure this space as you want, and I don't think you can get away with that. I don't think it's just in your power to say, I get to use my cell phone in this public space, and that's that. I don't know how we're going to settle this.
Well, but I mean, look at this. Suppose we had suppose for years there were never any women on commuter trains because women didn't have jobs. And so nobody ever had to listen to women talking on commuter trains. And then all of a sudden women are on commuter trains and they're talking. And somebody says, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just assert the right to have womenly talking on commuter trains.
Good analogy.
There's no moral significance between talking in your cell phone and talking to your neighbor as far as disturbing other people goes. So I don't know. I'm kind of with Jeff.
I see your point. I mean, that's an argument by what philosophers call parity of reasoning, right? If you wouldn't apply that kind of reasoning over here, and this is a structurally similar case, you can't apply it there.
Jeff, I have a suspicion that you have a very wise girlfriend, and that you should you should get her to help you develop a lower speaking voice normally that you can then use on the train. Don't worry about philosophy. Worry about gathering insights from your girlfriend about how to talk on the cell phone on the train. Thanks,
right,
Jeff.
Appreciate it, guys.
Okay, bye-bye. If you have a philosophical problem or quandary that's affecting your work or your play or keeping you awake at night, John and I would be happy to lend an ear and maybe give you some sound advice.
Go to the Philosophy Talk website and poke the conundrums button with your mouse, or just send an email to conundrums@philosophytalk.org. Philosophy Talk is a presentation of Ben Manila Productions and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University, copyright 2007.
Our executive producer is David Demarest.
Special thanks to Devin Strolovich, Daniel Elstein, Zoe Corneli, Merle Kessler, and Mark Stone.
Philosophy Talk is sponsored in part by Powell City of Books, on the web at powells.com. Support also comes from the Templeton Foundation.
And from various groups at Stanford University, the Friends of Philosophy Talk, and the members of KALW San Francisco, where our program originates.
The views expressed or misexpressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our other funders.
The conversation continues on our website, philosophytalk.org. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.
Thank you.